with a tough question. So I want you guys to think about this really hard. Raise your hand if you've had a tough start to 2020. Okay. So several of you, me too. I really feel like God's laid this on my heart because I used to believe this lie that every season of my life would change and maybe my life would get easier in the next season of life. That when I was in high school, I used to think, well, I'll do my devotionals next month when I don't have a test. Or when I was in college, I used to think, well, when I graduate and I have so much more time because I'll only be working one job, then God and I are going to get really close. And then when I graduated, I realized life gets hectic. After I graduated, I ended up back in school, and I ended up with a life and a husband and whatever. And now, my husband and I now we have 5 people in our family instead of 2, which has been a crazy last few months. And now life is chaos. And I don't know if you guys have ever had chaos in your life before. I don't know if you know what that feels like. But it makes life crazy, doesn't it? And sometimes you have a hard start to your year, and sometimes you get a little bit frustrated. Sometimes you feel like you've run out of time. Sometimes you feel like life is crazy. And I feel that today. I don't know if you guys feel that, but I know my life has gotten a little bit more crazy this year. But I want to learn how to hear God's voice in the chaos. And so I want to read to you today from a passage in Matthew. So if you have your Bible or if you have your phone or anything that you can pull up the Bible on, we're going to read Matthew 8:23-27. It's about Jesus and his disciples and when they encountered some chaos in their lives. It says, "Then he got into the boat and his disciples followed him. And suddenly a furious storm came up on the lake so that the waves swept over the boat. But Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him, saying, 'Lord, save us. We're going to drown.' And he replied, 'You of little faith, why are you so afraid?' And then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. And the men were amazed and asked, 'What kind of man is this? Even the winds and the waves obey him.'" This is one of my favorite passages in the Bible. For multiple reasons. And I feel like I always say that when I get up to preach a passage because I feel like I'm so excited to tell you what this says. But this is one of my favorite passages in the Bible because I relate to it on so many levels. When I was a child, my parents used to take us out on the lake all the time. I grew up, my parents had a boat. It was a great time. And we would go skiing all the time. Every single Sunday afternoon, I would go skiing with my parents on our boat. But one time, well, it was more than one time, we ran out of gas in the middle of the night. People don't typically boat at night. It's not the safest time to go boating, but we would boat all day long. And then at night, my parents would try to not go in until the very last minute. And one time, we ran out of gas. There was another time when our boat broke down, but this one time when we ran out of gas, I remember it so vividly that we were stuck out in the middle of the lake in the dark with no gas. My parents were paddling to shore with our boat, which was supposed to have a motor on it. So it's really heavy. It's hard to paddle a boat that has a motor on it. So they're paddling our boat to shore. It started raining, which is no fun. And it was cold. You know that feeling when you have a swimsuit on and you had been in the water, but then you get out of the water and you're freezing to death? That's how I felt. And I really thought we were going to die. In my 7-year-old brain, I thought I was dying. I thought we were out in the middle of where we weren't supposed to be, and it was raining, and we were all cold and wet, and we were going to die. My parents told me I was being just too dramatic. I don't know if you guys have been there or not. No? Okay. You guys are not dramatic, just me. But Jesus and his disciples go out in the middle of the sea, right? And it's deep, and it's kind of scary when it starts storming. All of a sudden, this storm comes up. And actually, the word that they use to describe it in Matthew is like an earthquake. Everyone on the boat is shaken, except for Jesus. The wind and the waves are coming over the boat as tall as they can see, and they don't know what to do next. They actually think they're going to drown. See, because if their boat tipped over in the middle of the sea, no one was coming to save them. They didn't have the Coast Guard like we do today. No one was coming for them at all. And they actually probably believed some stories, old wives' tales, that there were monsters in the lake, right? And they were afraid. They were so scared that they were going to end up drowning at the bottom of the lake or being eaten by a monster But this was just another typical day for a fisherman out on the lake. See, these storms were actually fairly common in the biblical times on this lake, that there were wind that would come down and spark up storms on this lake. And so actually, it's probably not the first storm that some of these fishermen that were disciples had been through, and it's probably not the last storm that would ever rock their boat. And much like us, they were fairly used to storms crossing by. You guys know how we have storms every so often? If you go to SNU, you'll know more about storms because they have more see, they're all shaking their heads. They have more tornadoes and things over there. So you'll know more about storms if you go there. But like us, they had these storms that would pass through in the town in which they lived. And the trouble is that if you got caught out in a storm on the open water, it was the most dangerous place to be. Because you're not on dry land, your boat could get sunk, anything could happen out on the water, and it was the worst place to be. But sometimes you couldn't see the storm coming. Just like us, sometimes in our life, we don't see it when chaos is headed our way. And that's the trouble with chaos and storms in our lives. Everything can change in just an instant. And that's exactly what happens here. See, because chaos is a part of life. Unfortunately, you're going to find in your life that bad things happen that you can't just ignore. You're going to get stuck in a storm where you find that there's no way out. You're going to know what I'm talking about one day if you don't know what I'm talking about already. You're going to get stuck in a place that maybe you didn't want to be or you never intended to go. I don't know if you have any of these things in your life right now, but maybe school has really just shaking you right now. Maybe you have something happening with your friends that has really just messed up your life right now. Maybe you're trying to keep up appearances so hard that you don't know who you are anymore. Maybe your family is falling apart. Maybe there's things that you don't tell people. I don't know if you guys are going through anything today. I don't know, but I know that you just raised your hands and said that you've had a tough start to 2020. And I think all of us can find ourselves in a storm where we didn't want to be. And we can't get away from it, and it isn't just you in this boat. See, we're all there. We all end up in chaos. We all share in the chaos of this world, and we all have things that cause us to question our next steps in life. And you don't grow out of it. As I already told you, I find chaos in my life all the time. I'm really good at finding it, actually. And Jesus knows this. Jesus knows that there's chaos in the world and there's bad things that can happen, and yet, what's he doing? He's taking a nap. See, God also knew that there was chaos in the world, and he didn't shelter Jesus from it. God lets this storm show up when they're on this boat. And what's Jesus doing? Sleeping. It's the craziest thing. Because here's the thing. Jesus didn't come to just die for us on the cross and save us from our sins. That's exactly what he did, but that's not the only thing that he did. He came to show us how to live. And I think here we find out what he wants us to do in the middle of the storms. See, Jesus had asked them to get in the boat and go across this sea. And so the disciples are probably thinking in their minds when he's taking a nap and they're all about to drown, excuse me, Jesus, do you even know what you're doing, Jesus? Why did you ask us to cross this, Jesus? Aren't you supposed to be in charge here, Jesus? You guys ever asked these questions to God? Because I have. And Jesus is with them through it all, but it looks like he's not paying attention. I don't know if you guys have ever prayed and you felt like God was asleep, but I have. I've prayed those prayers where I felt like God wasn't paying attention, where God wasn't asleep. And it feels so true sometimes when I'm in the throes of life and things are happening to me and I'm like, God, why? I don't know if you guys have prayed that prayer. But the disciples decide to do something about it. They used Jesus actually as a last resort. They were trying to get the boat stable on their own. They were trying to figure out what to do in the storm, trying not to fall off the boat probably. And then they eventually get together and they go like, okay, what should we do? And they go find Jesus and decide to do something about it. Even though he's not really the best sailor probably. But they figure, Jesus probably knows something about, what we're supposed to do here. And this is actually my other favorite part of the story. Because as a youth pastor here, I don't know if you guys have ever woken people up. Anyone? I like to wake people up and scare them a little bit. So if your neighbor's not awake, here's what they do. They run up to Jesus and they say, Lord, save us. Is anyone awake? No? Poke your neighbor. Okay. They shout, Lord, save us. They're saying, God, we need your help in the middle of the storm. We know that if something doesn't happen, we are going to die. We are in trouble and we need you. Save us now. They were probably shouting at him, screaming at him, begging him to save them because they knew that they needed it. But Jesus' response to what they did was not what they were looking for. I don't know if you guys have ever prayed, God, get me out of this season of life. Get me out of this storm. Get me out of this thing that I'm going through. But that's not what Jesus says that they should be asking for here. Looking to Jesus is the right answer, but they had the wrong intentions. They needed Jesus in this moment to calm the storm. They didn't need Jesus to calm the storm. They needed Jesus to be there with them and know that he controlled the wind and the waves no matter what they were going through. They don't need the storm calmed. I don't know if you guys understand this or not, but when you're going through life and you have some trouble with your friends, I know in high school I always had trouble with my friends because, let's face it, high schoolers make the worst friends, okay? It's okay, it's going to get better. But I don't know if you have ever been here where you're so frustrated that you ask God, can I just get past this season of life? But this is exactly where the disciples are in the middle of the storm, and they're frustrated and they don't know where to turn, and they say, God, get us out of it. And he says, I'm right here. Just look at me. He says, you know what? Fine, I'll calm the wind and the waves. And so we find out that Jesus has actually been in control the whole time because he answers their prayer and he calms the wind and the waves, and it suddenly gets really, really quiet. In the Bible, it says that there is a remarkable calm. If you've been in the worst storm of your life, think about that. And then think about the fact that the Bible tells us that when Jesus tells the sea to be still, it looks like glass. And there's no more wind. There's not a cloud in the sky. It's a beautiful day. And all of a sudden, they see that Jesus was in control all along. That we have nothing to fear when we go through hard times in life, because here is the reality, is that Jesus wins at the end. And we already know that. Jesus is in control no matter where you are in life, no matter what's happening in your life. And that the power of Jesus in our lives is unmeasured. See, that if you have Jesus in your life, no matter what is happening to you, God is still in control of the universe. The disciples were amazed. They were in awe. They had wonder. They took pause because they had never seen anything like this in their whole lives. Like I told you, some of them were fishermen. Some of them had probably seen storms before, but they had never stood there and seen the wind and the waves calmed in a second, in the blink of an eye. And they realized that God is in control, no matter what. And they realized that Jesus was fully God and fully human, like what they said, that Jesus is Lord, that he created the world, and that he is in charge of the wind and the waves, and that he can defeat sin and death. And I found this quote. It says, God does not withhold help even from those whose faith is small. I don't know if you feel like you have a small faith today. I don't know what's rocked your world. I keep telling you that, but Jesus says, even if you have the littlest bit of faith, he'll stand with you through anything, through everything. God isn't afraid of hard things. God isn't afraid of storms. God knows the truth when we are uncertain. God sees a future when we don't see one. And we serve a God who desires for us to look for him in the storms of our life, to look for him in the chaos of our lives. And if you're in the middle of a hard thing, I want to encourage you to stand firm in the middle of any mess, Because no matter what you're going through, God is still in charge of the universe. And Jesus still sits on the throne in heaven. And in James, it says that when we go through trials of many kinds, we should count it as pure joy. That we should actually be happy. We should have joy in our hearts when we go through hard things because our faith produces endurance. And then we get hope from endurance. So guys, when you're going through the hard things, when life feels like it's about to kick you to the curb and you think, well, I might just die, look for Jesus. Because he's still there with you. He never abandoned you, even when you feel like life is hard, when it's tough, when you don't feel like you can go on anymore. Jesus is right there with you. And I know that this is hard to say. I know that sometimes it feels like, you know what, I can't go on anymore, and that person up there telling me that I should just trust in Jesus doesn't understand. But guys, we've all been through hard things. And the disciples had each other as they were standing there trying to figure out who Jesus is, and you have your friends in this room. Ask them to pray for you. Ask the adults in this room to pray for you. Go through life together, because sometimes when we go through hard things, we need the person standing next to us as well as Jesus. But when we choose to trust Jesus, eventually we can follow God into the hard places, into the storms of life, into all of the crazy things that God might ask us to do, because we have endurance and we have hope. And this is where I want to talk about your future. Maybe you graduate this year. Maybe you graduate in 2 years or 4 years. I don't know. But we're talking about college decisions today and asking you to consider making Jesus a part of your future. And I know you probably have thousands of unanswered questions about your future, but I want to give you some solid answers about your future. Wherever you go in life after high school, if you go to a job, if you go anywhere, take these 3 things with you. Wherever you go, make sure that you have Jesus in your boat. Make sure that you can see him, that literally if you are looking for Jesus, you know where to find him. Make sure that you have Jesus somewhere in your boat. And make sure that you're being challenged in your faith, that you can grow in your faith. Make sure that you have a community of faith around you wherever you end up in life so that they can challenge you to grow and to learn. And then the final thing is practice serving people even when you aren't going through hard things yourself. Each and every single one of you has a future out there. And I know that right now, if you're going through a hard thing, you can learn. You can learn to continually trust in Jesus and put your faith in him and say, God, I want you to take me wherever you want me to go. Because I think that's the best prayer that we could pray as Christians. God, I give you full control of my life. I want to go somewhere where I can see you in my boat. I want to go somewhere where I'm going to grow in my faith and be challenged. And I want to go somewhere where I can practice serving other people like you taught me to. Each and every single one of us in this room has a future. And I want to ask you a question. Are you relying on Jesus? Those of you that raised your hand that said that you had a hard start to 2020, are you relying on Jesus? Are you looking for him in the middle of the wind and the waves? Because he's in control and he can take it from you. And those of you who are looking at college decisions, are you making sure that Jesus is in your boat and that you're serving him and that you're going wherever he wants you to go? Because that's the question I want to pose to you today. And I want to take us into a time of prayer here in just a minute, but I want to ask you if you have Jesus in your boat. Because this is the most important thing that you can do for your future. Because no matter where you go, you can take Jesus with you. And he can help you through the hard things, and he'll never leave you. He'll never forsake you. He'll never give up on you. But he'll stay with you. And so I want to open the altars and ask if any of you would like to come and get a little bit closer with Jesus today. Maybe ask Jesus just to go to college with you or school with you tomorrow. I don't know what it is. But I want to encourage you to come and to build a deeper relationship with Jesus.